Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Horn of Africa TV Conversations with me, my good friend, Professor Mohamed. How are you today, Mohamed?
I'm okay, Elias. How are you?
How's it going?
It's okay. Weather is getting much better. We are very happy.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
Spring is now fully arrived.
Indeed.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's another week, Mohamed, and today we'll be focusing on the reports of the so-called human rights organizations, Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, as well as the Western media that has been inundating the waves from the Tigray region of Ethiopia. So-called Aksum massacre, sometimes Tigray genocide, and the social media and the mainstream media. And in particular, we would like to focus on one very good report, factual, evidence-based, by a group, by the group called Investig'Action, and the writer is Frans De Maegd. You know this group very well, you're involved with them. So first, tell us a little bit background of who Investig'Action is, when was it founded, its aim, its mission, and then a little bit about the writer, Frans De Maegd. And we will talk about the report in English. It says propaganda on massacres in Ethiopia may raise fears of intervention in the Horn of Africa. This was written in the website Investig'Action on 18 March 2021, that is last week. So let's begin with Investig'Action, the group. When was it founded? What is it about?
First of all, Investig'Action, it is a group of progressive journalists. The Belgian famous journalist Michel Collot, he have created it. Michel Collot, he was involved with the war which was against Yugoslavia, and he have published a very big book on the propaganda which was waged against Yugoslavia. Based on that, Michel also, he was...
That was in the 1990s, right?
In the 1990s. Before that also, Michel was a journalist of a journal called Solidaire of the Labour Party's journal. He was also involved in the same time that when they made a propaganda against Romania, Ceausescu, particularly in a city called Timișoara, and they have shown that dead bodies and babies. And they claimed in the day of Christmas Eve, they claimed that Ceausescu is drinking the blood of children, and that it became fake. So Michel Collot and his group, they are, you could say, specialists in propaganda. That it is, they show pictures, but the picture doesn't fit to the story, and so on, and they try to clarify to the people. Every time happens after they did such kind of black propaganda. They show sometimes a real picture, but interpret it differently, and so on and so on. And Frans De Maegd himself is a militant, member of the Labour Party. He knows of all this imperialist intrigue of media, and he understood what was the campaign against Eritrea for the last 22 years. He have visited Eritrea twice with me and with a group of Belgians and non-Belgians together, because it is, and he knows very clearly that when a country was targeted, what kind of propaganda is they are organizing. It is the same propaganda.
You produced together with him the documentary film Eritrea Come and See, right?
Yes, with Michel Collot, yes, indeed. We presented that. Eritrea Come and See, in order to fight against the propaganda which was waged by certain element in the West, and it was also taken by others, by putting dark on the Eritrean face. This propaganda have two objectives. One is for those die-hard, really not believed, but they use this propaganda for their political objectives. And their political objective, of course, on Eritrea was a regime change, which they didn't succeed. And of course, the ordinary people, they are bombarded by the main media and the main journal, lies and so on. And lies, when it is repeated too much, it becomes a truth in the mind of the people. And the purpose of Michel Collot and his Investig'Action is that to show all this lie, which constantly was made on Yugoslavia and Romania, on Libya, and all other places, that it is all wars are waged on the basis of a lie, by showing sometimes fake pictures, because the ordinary people, for example, on the Libyan situation, when they were making propaganda, there was a very serious, there was an election and people queuing for election, and they showed that picture as if the people are demonstrating in Libya. So people cannot differentiate the faces of the Indian and the Libyans. They just show that picture, and they say that the people in Libya, they are demonstrating. This is the trick they do. So it's no different from what they did in Tigray. But it is not bad. Before we go to the article of a friend of us, Frans De Maegd, I think we have to put some theoretical foundation of such kind of propaganda. Why always they go to that propaganda, and how they fabricated, how they use the pictures, innocent pictures. Sometimes they can be honest pictures, but the interpretation of them depends on the journalist who try to use this picture and fit it to his theory. The first thing, I think, when propaganda became an important tool in the imperialist states, particularly after the Bolshevik Revolution in the Soviet Union, the first propaganda came is anti-Soviet, saying that it is the Soviet. There was a famine when the intervention happened of 15 countries who invaded the Soviet to overthrow the Soviets from power, but they didn't succeed, and a lot of people killed. And the first propaganda against the Soviet developed at that moment, using the Red Cross files. And that Red Cross was giving assistance to the people who are suffering because of the civil war and the famine which had happened. That file was used later on by US experts in propaganda against the Soviet Union in the 30s, which they claimed that there is a huge number of famine and a lot of people died in Ukraine. And they showed the pictures of 1918 until 1923, that there was a famine in that country because of the war. And they showed it that it is happened in the time of collectivization and industrialization in Ukraine. The picture, they took it from the file of the Red Cross, Geneva, and they fixed it in their story. So there was an American historian who had discovered that all the pictures are lies. It have nothing to do with the events, what happened in 1932 in Ukraine. But to use that by showing that picture in their books, most of them, like Robert Conquest and so on, they were using that. And if you calculate what Robert Conquest saying, how the people who have been killed by that famine and by the Soviet Union, it became more than the Soviet Union. But people doesn't calculate. So they show picture, which it is a correct picture. It is, yes, people died, but they fixed it to their stories.
The context is totally different.
The context is totally different. That is one. As a result of that, and that propaganda with Radio Free Europe and all this, they were making heavy propaganda in the time of the Cold War against the Soviet Union. They have developed it, but propaganda is seriously developed later on by the Nazis. So 3 Soviet historians have published a very big book called Propaganda, and they are analyzing the nature of the propaganda. The Nazis, they were making propaganda, and how the fascists in Italy and all other places are making propaganda and their method of propaganda. And they divided propaganda in 3 levels. They say there is a white propaganda. White propaganda is when the state claims or explains or wants to do. Then the white propaganda is very easy to identify because you can go to the roots, you will find the document, you look at it, even statement of state and so on. So white propaganda is very easy to identify according to the Soviet historians. Then you have a gray propaganda. A gray propaganda is a mix of black and white news. They use official statement, and then they attach to it a black one. A black, in a sense, is that a fake one. So to make it a real news. The gray propaganda in normal circumstance, it is a combination of the white propaganda and the black propaganda by itself. The black propaganda is the most sophisticated one. It uses, like the Ukrainian famine, for example, it uses the file of the 20s. It shows dead bodies and so on, and then it exaggerates. It says a lot of million died and so on. It could be at that moment a lot of million people died, but they fixed it and they attach it to one specific target and in one specific time. And they said that in Ukraine in 1932, such a million people died, and they show that picture which had been taken in the Red Cross files, 1918 until 20. That is black propaganda. So what we see now is that it is, particularly from the 1990 and in the areas where they wanted a regime change and an invasion and humanitarian intervention, majority of the propaganda, almost all of it, is a black propaganda. What they show, for example, a picture of a church as the Aksum Church and so on. They might show also some people are going there and so on, and then suddenly they will tell you that it is massacre happened there. Sometimes even they don't show the massacres itself. They don't show bodies because they don't have bodies. So they show you people movement, and then immediately they say they were killed, in the sense that you assume that all those people who came to the church are killed, and then there is nobody remain. It's a pure propaganda, black propaganda, to incite for humanitarian intervention if it is not humanitarian sanction against the government they want to create, and to incriminate with crimes. But all journalists, people and so on, they take it over and then they broadcast it. This is one thing. But one have to understand that it is this is not suddenly appeared. It was prepared. It was consciously planned, and it was also thought about it. It is they didn't expect the demise of the TPLF in a very short period. They thought that the TPLF can resist longer, and by resisting longer, you can do this black propaganda added to it, to their war, and hoping that they can succeed and defeat the government of Ethiopia, and maybe it create a very big chaotic situation in that country. It is two things they have combined, which one they don't mention. They don't speak from where to start the war, what was the purpose of the war, what to do, why TPLF has attacked the Ethiopian army there, what is the purpose of the TPLF, and so on. They don't speak about that. That part must be hidden, because that part will make you to think, and then you make a research, and you will know that what they are doing is a lie. So they never mentioned the history of the war. They never also mentioned the organization itself, that it have ruled the country for 27 years, what it did in that country, how it looted the country, the genocide it committed in every area since all. Why is the uprising in Ethiopia since 2014 started, the peasant uprising in Oromia and also other places, Amare region, Gambela, the genocide in Somali area. All to close that, they never speak that it is what is TPLF and so on. They just say in general Tigray, the region. So in a way, is that to hide the history of TPLF atrocity in that country, that it is, it will open for them another window. If they mention the organization, if they mention that organization ruled the country and now ran away to Tigray. So people will ask why they ran away to Tigray. They were ruling this country. They were chased away by the popular revolt. So what did they have done? That question should not be asked. So they just start the history.
They hide the history.
They hide all this. The history must be hidden. So suddenly Tigray becomes a victim because somebody invaded her. So according to them, it is Eritrean troops and the federal government. In fact, they don't even mention...
Another fact that they hide, also a very crucial fact, is that on November 4, 2020, it was the TPLF itself that launched the preemptive attack on the Northern Command and started the war.
Indeed. That they don't mention. Then if you say the TPLF is the one who have started the war by attacking the Ethiopian troops inside Tigray, then it is your propaganda will be in a problem, because it is the objective you wanted to raise is that it is Tigray is victim, and not only Tigray, indirectly also TPLF without mentioning it. So that TPLF becomes a sort of representative of the people of Tigray. They are also victims. They don't mention, they never mention TPLF have ever ruled Ethiopia. So very carefully planned that it is as if suddenly people of Tigray become problem. That it is the purpose is not to have a political analysis. What happened there, who is who, for what purpose this war came, who ignited the war, who was responsible, who ruled Ethiopia 27 years and so on. That question must be avoided. So perfectly planned, calculated, well thought about it. So you could see it is all of them, they started after demise of TPLF, you see? And then they make a campaign to give it a popular humanitarian clause in such a way to create a sympathy, to put pressure on the government of Ethiopia, and concentrating also too much that it is the Eritrean troops who did it, the Eritreans who have intervened. This is a not internal contradiction. It is Eritrea who had invaded Tigray and so on. So to combine these two and to make the aggressor a victim and incite international sentiment toward not the Tigrayan people in general, but it is specific that to create a sympathy for their friends. But one have to understand one thing. This thing didn't happen so because of 4 of November. I think TPLF, by being a minority by itself, and once when they took over the power, and after 1995, they made an election, they put their own constitution, and they got elected. 3 years later, they ignited a war against Eritrea. And in that 3 years, they were preparing. But when the war failed until 2000, TPLF understood the value of the false propaganda. All elements, charlatan, people individuals who came closer to them, they made them friends, they showered them with money, they recruited them as a propagandist for them, and so on. And that continued, that by the TPLF is a progressive in the name of EPRDF, and gradually it became that it is Ethiopia is a double-digit growing country, which is fake. There is no scientific and economic analysis in a concrete sense of it. They abuse and misuse the statistics. And in that way, TPLF learned a lot by paying a huge amount of money. This is one side, recruiting, making friends, and so on, particularly Western intellectuals who have no any principle in life except getting money from this frightened minority ruling Ethiopia. So the interest of them, which is a convenient, if I am frightened minority ruling Ethiopia, anything can happen, isolated from the region, wage war against Eritrea and so on. So these friends, new friends of mine, who I pay them, and they themselves have no political or ideological principles, they can be bought very easily from crisis group individuals to all Alex Dawal and all these regnate elements who are really dishonest individuals, and they are not, some of them, they call themselves academics, but they are dishonest academics and so on. They combined them, and together they worked this for almost 22 years, the campaign for TPLF. But they didn't expect that TPLF will collapse very soon. They have never analyzed the sentiment of the majority Ethiopian people. They consider them, they are just dormant, sleeping people, and it will take very long time to rise up and to overthrow the TPLF. But history judged things differently, and the TPLF was chased away from the capital and they ran away to Tigray. In 2 years and a half, TPLF was doing two things. One is trying to mobilize the population of Tigray. This is by television, as now when we saw it, even majority of the people of Tigray, they were not mobilized the way that they were showing it in the television and so on. They said that they celebrated their 45th birthday, that they have mobilized the people and so on. With their miscalculation, again, they attacked the army, and then in 2 weeks' time, they just evaporated. And a lot of people got surprised, including their friends. And they were very shocked because the image they had about TPLF itself also is a black propaganda against them became. Because from inside, it is nothing. It is empty. It is a very big balloon, and they thought that it will fight for a very long time, and then we'll make propaganda for our friends and so on, and suddenly melted within 2 weeks' time. And this surprised their friends and even others, even so-called journalists, specialists of the area. They said that we never thought that it will melt down like ice cream within 2 weeks' time. Anger them very much. And then they targeted in their logic, it's not possible that the Ethiopian army could defeat this. It must be an Eritrean army. And it's the Eritreans who are the better organized. So it has to be blamed. So we have to turn all the propaganda into a black propaganda, into genocide and rape and so on. They use two things, basically. Or children, women. These are the two known tools of propaganda. The children pictures in a big number, it didn't work because it will boomerang against you. You have, and of course, children are very innocent. People will be emotional to that and so on. But you have to combine it. But the woman issue is little bit touching here, and in the Western world, that it is the woman rights to a certain extent had increased. Women participate in the society more and more since after the Second World War and this, and the woman becoming more educated and so on. And this women sentiment is very, very important to influence and use that they hate.
A very emotive issue also, sexual violence against women, rape, these are very, they solicit immediate reaction from...
Immediate reaction. And it is a very savagery and so on, and it will... they wanted to block discussion. When you do this, you block a discussion in the mind. People, they ask me, women are raped and so on. It's very difficult to say raped or not raped. You will enter into a debate which you will never end up. So you have to be able to break it into pieces, and you have to show it on the basis of history, how women issue is abused to make a regime change and bring a disaster for the country, as they did in Libya. For example, in Libya, they said that Libyan government have bought a lot of millions of Viagras distributing to our soldiers, and he ordered them to go and rape women. That is the propaganda. The second very important within the propaganda is the Eurocentrism. We, the civilized West, we will not do this thing. Only savages will do that. They will attack their own women and so on, and they have no discipline, they have no human sentiment, they are very, very fascist type, backward and so on. So by showing that, you
so the human rights organizations,
yes.
Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, carry the white man's burden to rescue the poor women of Tigray.
Indeed, that is it. You incite a democratic sentiment inside the people. You use that human feeling for an evil objective, intervention, and now they never speak about Libya. They are ashamed and they keep quiet. And when you tell them this happened in Libya, the same person who does it says, yes, we did it in this way, and so on. They don't speak. And here is the black propaganda says, according to Goebbels, he says that black propaganda must be utilized very, very carefully. Very careful, and only you score one time. You cannot score twice with black propaganda, because the picture is fake, because it's fake in the sense that it is, you connect things are not together and so on. But he said the main purpose is to steal the mind of the observer for a very short period. If you succeed to steal the mind and you create that emotion, you have achieved your black propaganda. Whatever after that, if they write about it, it's okay, it becomes a history. But the objective is realized. The objective could be an invasion, the objective to be and to ignite a war, and so on and so on. Later on, historians or journalists, after weeks, we discovered, but it is already released in the mind of the people. So you cannot also knock every door and say, look, what you have seen yesterday is wrong, and so on, because the people also have to digest it, and it takes time. I remember with the Romanian situation in Timișoara, is a city in and they showed the picture on the eve of Christmas. People were shocked because it is, and that is and then to show how Ceausescu was diabolic, he is a vampire, he's drinking the blood of children and so on. And then the same prime minister, at that moment, Belgian prime minister, he said that this is a vampire state. This one is drinking the milk of the blood of babies. After a few months, he said it's not true, but it was achieved. So that is that short period to steal and to maneuver and put a black tissue on the mind of the intelligent people for a while, and that is what in Tigray happened, because they never spoke. If you look, every propaganda, what they are doing is that it is. I ask people, what did you know about TPLF? They say, we don't know TPLF. What is TPLF? They ask you, because they removed the TPLF from that, and they only spoke about Tigray in general. So the image is the government also, which is supposed to be Tigray is part of Ethiopia, is attacking the people of Tigray in alliance with other government from outside, and they are doing these criminal things, and particularly they didn't say that, they said that it is women. They concentrated on Tigrayan women, but they are the ones who have released most of the prisoners. It's very difficult to explain. So emotion dominated, and that was their purpose. And the second purpose is with TPLF, TPLF after 2000 understood is a minority and its future in this country to rule is limited. Therefore, the only tools, what tools you have, if you cannot convince Ethiopian people with your project for a very long time, a minority of 6% and they don't even represent the people of Tigray in these conditions. What option you will have to maintain is propaganda. So you have to buy propagandists. What happened is in European Union here in Brussels, there is about 50,000 lobbyists. If you can have 2-3 lobbyist companies or lobby for you, a triangular lobby. One is that to lobby within academics, to lobby within the politicians, and so on, to lobby also within the media and make them your friend. And then they themselves produce, because it's not produced by TPLF, the propaganda must have a menu of its own. I don't think TPLF propaganda, which is producing it in Ethiopia, it will fit to the European Union propaganda because it is primitive, it doesn't fit to the psychology of the population, and so on. So these journalists, friends of them who are lobbyists, who are being bought by TPLF, they will fix for them, dress it very nicely, perfume it, and so on, in the psychology of the local population of Europe. And they knew that it is certain things, it is very taboo within the European population, that it is people, they don't feel good to see this in television, it irritates them, the Eurocentrism, it is there, and so on. And why these savages always are killing each other, why they are raping, why they are doing this, and so on. So it incites a sort of Eurocentrism for the ordinary population. Of course, the most sophisticated one they knew, but for the ordinary people, it is a shock. Yesterday, I went to the dentist, and she's a very nice woman, very kind, a mother of two. Me and my children, we go to the dentist to her. She knows my kids since they were born, and there were kids coming to her and so on. And I had an appointment and I went. And she asked me, the first thing she asked me about this issue. But because she knows me as a person, the discussion became, here is the difference between propaganda, black propaganda, and when people know you as an individual. She knows me more than 30 years and so on. She said, what's happening in your country? The first question, she said, this conflict and this problem, Tigray, is it you are from there? Did it come from, you live there? Because when I see the television, I always think about you, whether you are safe or not, and this, because her children also played with my children and this and this. That is one, Tigray. So I have to explain to her how big is Ethiopia. There is no way that in 2 minutes, in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, you can explain all the history. So I told her the distance between where I was born and where the conflict you have seen, it's about 850 kilometers. Oh, that's very long. It's very far, she said. My parents, they visit Ethiopia. They like Ethiopia, she said. It's a beautiful country and so forth. At least she has some information from her parents too. To give us an example, then I told her the country also have a lot of languages because Belgium also is a language country and there is a conflict of languages. I have to pack it in my way in the Belgian situation. Then I explained it to her that they have dominated the country and so on, and this percent they are, but they are even from that they are irrelevant, a very small minority who doesn't even constitute more than 300, 400 individuals and this and this and this. And I explained. Then she said, but why media doesn't say that? I said, that is the question. That is the media and you don't own the media. So then she said, but they have interest with them. I said, yes, 27 years they were eating together and the other one was paying and they had promoted all this time. Then I asked her, but they never mentioned this organization. She said, I only hear from you now. They just mentioned Tigray, that it is the region. So I explained to her, she said, oh, that's good, that's good. Now I understand. They only show that. Then she asked me, But what does this neighboring country, Eritrea, have to do with that? Because it's a discussion they locked it in. I explained to her and so on. That's also is a victim, yeah. But they don't like it. They say North Korea, as you know, Amnesty International make propaganda, the others make propaganda and this and this. Then she said it's as usual as in Iraq and so on. She's an intellectual woman. She said, always is the same and this and this. And then she said, we are fed up of it. We don't even look at it anymore. I mean, but one thing I realized that a lot of Europeans, what they asked me, all of them knew there is something hidden. Then they asked, is Tigray have oil? Is Tigray is a rich area? That's what they asked me. There must be something for their interest. But my understanding is the long lobbyists who have worked with TPLF, they also, by the change in Ethiopia, they became redundant. And their market, it's closed. So TPLF also have stolen a lot of money, probably showering them with money. And they have gradually penetrated by analyzing weak individuals and so on. Individuals from Susan Rice down, they say that it is the woman, she's a millionaire. What they do is that such kind of individuals, they, through their family, through their husband, through their sons and so on, they trade before belt. When I was in the embassy in Washington, D.C., one incident I will tell you, that the late Robert Oakley, he sent his son with another Pakistani who want access for a mobile phone to sell in Ethiopia, because they used to do it in Pakistan and they wanted to expand. And he uses his father as a lobbyist. So if you wanted to help your son to make money in African continent or Rwanda or this and this, their political connection is that, okay, I rub my back, I will rub for you, and so on, I will be lobbyist for you, of course you will pay me, but at the same time, you can promote the interest of my son, and so on. So this is the wheeling and dealing of the Western politicians in Europe and United States, because this is a black money, they don't pay tax on it, and so on and so on. And they support such kind of regimes. They knew it is ethically is wrong, but it is the money they get, and life makes life easy, and it makes also life easy for their children. So this is the combination. But of course, on the ground there is no TPLF. It's a temporary propaganda, and this temporary
remnants of the TPLF in the diaspora in the West are driving up, in a way, this propaganda. Also, the question arises: why is the drumming up of humanitarian intervention of this humanitarian crisis, even hinting genocide, massacres that never happened? Why are they doing that? Usually, this kind of propaganda usually leads to what they call the humanitarian intervention, responsibility to protect. This is, of course, not in the UN Charter, but it has become a sort of a prelude to war, as if it is backed up by UN. Typical example, a classical example, is that of 2011 in Libya. Is the same scenario now being hyped up in Ethiopia, in the Tigray province? Because when you see the pattern is the same. The pattern is also the same, by the way, with the pre-2009 situation on Eritrea. You remember how they were manufacturing all kinds of false stories about Eritrea intervening in Somalia, supporting Al-Shabaab, the manufactured border conflict with Djibouti, which eventually then led up to the sanctions that they imposed on Eritrea at the UN Security Council. There are similarities in the patterns. So inquiring minds say, to what end is this being hyped up? we have seen in our previous discussions with you the global situation, the rivalry between, the emerging China and the United States. And is this somehow tied to that, would you say?
It is three fundamental things they have understood. One is since Eritrea's independence until today, the majority of Ethiopian people never had a clear understanding of Eritrean struggle and the Eritrean revolution and their understanding toward Ethiopia and the region. Because all the governments have led Ethiopia survived by making Eritrea as a scapegoat. So it didn't went into the mind of Ethiopian people to understand and to digest the real cause, and once you understand that, you will all go to the second stage, okay, that we can also build a new relationship on the new basis. What happened is that the regimes collapsed because all of them, you could say, because of the Eritrean revolution, and the TPLF also collapsed because of the steadfastness of Eritrea itself. After 2000, Haile Selassie's regime before.
3 times in Ethiopia's recent history, states collapsed because they were unable to resolve the Eritrean problem or the Eritrean question.
Yes.
In 1974, Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown, largely because the military that was stationed in Eritrea started the mutiny, which then boomeranged or had the ripple effect all over Ethiopia, which eventually led to the coup d'etat that overthrew the Haile Selassie regime. That was 1974. Then the Derg, the military regime, took over, ruled for 17 years, continued the war against Eritrea, refused to resolve it through political means until the very end. And in 1991, it was militarily defeated both in Eritrea and Ethiopia. Second time. Third time, in 1991, the TPLF and its EPRDF took over, ruled Ethiopia for 27 years. In between, the TPLF also launched war against Eritrea under the border pretext and refused to resolve the conflict by legal arbitration of the International Court, extended the war for 20 years, which eventually led to the crisis within Ethiopia, an uprising, and it led to its demise in 2018. So these are the 3 times for our viewers who are not familiar with the history. Because the media, as you said, would hide this history, but we don't hide it, right? We have to make it manifest.
Yes, Comrade Elias, I think you have that document. I hope you will attach it. The Defense Minister of Haile Selassie, after the mutiny of the army in Eritrea, he visited them after the discussion, the report he wrote to the emperor.
Oh, General Kebede Gebre. A memorandum he wrote in Amare, but yes.
In Amharic, yes. Please, that issue, attach it to this program for our viewers to read it, and you can send it to me also. It is a very good document to discuss and Ethiopians to read and to understand. You could see yesterday's statement also because of lack of understanding of Eritrea's revolution and Eritrea's independence, what that means to the region, and the region adapting, Ethiopia adapting and establishing as Dr. Abiy says a new relationship in the Horn of Africa. Probably tomorrow or today, the three head of states of Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, they are going to meet in Addis Ababa to strengthen the Horn of Africa relation and so on. It will be a very good occasion to put that document also to our viewers to read it, particularly Ethiopians, to understand that it is.
We will put that in the description section. This was a memorandum written by then Chief of Staff of Ethiopia, Lieutenant General Kebede Gebre. He's writing to the emperor of how to resolve the Eritrean situation. Essentially, he was telling him there is no military solution. We have tried it for over 12 years. It's a dead end. We have to find a political solution.
Good. The second propagandist is that the propagandists there were three types, but later on combined they became one. The first propagandists who had been propagandists in academics and so on, most of them became old and left and so on and died. The Ethiopianists, the way they used to analyze and minimize the Eritrean revolution. Most of them have now become emeritus or old. Some of them even they rectified, they wrote certain other documents and so on. Second is that it is the propagandists with the same understanding continued, that who believe that it is this contradiction or this Eritrean-Ethiopian contradiction must remain constantly in order for them is like a gold mine, that it is by siding one or another, they think that they can accumulate and easily they can have an access and friendship in the region, because they don't want the region itself to create friendship among themselves. So they wanted to be the go-between by friends and so on. This element also grew up, but in the third level, very shallow, young people, quick fixers, I call them quick fixers of lobbyists and charlatan intelligentsia. They also joined this. And the main era, the main concept is in no way we will allow there will be a relationship, a normal relationship of a good neighborhood in the region. That region must be divided and the perception of the people who are in the power or the majority of the population, they have to be in contradiction. When you say I'm an Ethiopian, must be in contradiction with Eritrea. When you are a Somali, you are also in contradiction with Ethiopia. And so this must remain. But suddenly this tradition which they have heard and grow up for the last 8 decades, suddenly broken by the demise of TPLF. And this have frightened them in the sense that if the region become peaceful and they can work and they can solve their own contradiction on the table and discuss and cooperate and so on, then the image of the region will be different and the region also will reintegrate. And those reintegration, the concept of reintegration, frightened the imperialist forces, whether up or in the middle, they're propagandists, that this is very dangerous development. It has to be stopped. So the question comes, the only way it can be stopped by the propaganda using the condition in Tigray. One, they are not thinking for the people of Tigray. They are not interested about Tigray. This is one. The region should not come closely, naturally.
Must be destabilized.
Must be destabilized. So in that sense that it is the whole Western world, Europe and United States, thinks in that term, in two geopolitical concepts. One, United States, it have also penetrating Africa. They want the resources of African continent at the same time to stop their competitor, particularly now China and so on and so on. This one side. Second, if the whole of Africa is getting reintegrated, they will start thinking rational and they will not be used in the war of external forces and so on, and they can develop their own relation, economic relation, social relation, and so on. And the weakest links to that is the intelligentsia and segment of the Ethiopian intelligentsia and certain Ethiopian things this always brought up with the contradiction. They only knew how to use this contradiction, frighten their own people, not to have relations among the region and so on, even though the Prime Minister and so on, they want that a new Horn of Africa. And of course, he always says that this war we could have lost if the Eritrean and government didn't help our troops when they ran away and killed to Eritrea. They were dressed, fed, and supported, and they were given to me. And as a result of that, TPLF have evaporated. So this they don't want. And if this tradition grow more, then it will engulf most of our Horn of African countries, and they might get stability. For the Europeans, it is Ethiopia is a stepping stone of controlling also the African continent by budgetary subsidies, by giving food aid and so on, maintaining Ethiopia and the region to continue as before as a subsidiary of their new colonies and so on. This frightened them. So it is two things is combined. One, the objective in the future, and immediate and future. Second is they are not interested on Tigray. They just use that. It could be also Gambela if it is possible, or it could be any place and so on. So the purpose is that the main is they should not come together. This, the leadership and the population, they should not come together. They should not understand each other. The younger generation is going to learn a new culture, a new vision about himself, about the country, about the region. This, by any sense, must be stopped. So that is why it is not because of Tigray, and they are not interested on the people of Tigray. These Tigrayans, they should understand that. They are just to use them, they use their energy, they tell them go out and demonstrate, and so on. This is to create a picture, an image, and they use them as the files.
As useful idiots.
Useful idiots, yes. They use them, but they don't.
As for example, they use in Syria in the beginning certain segments like
yes,
wanted liberal democracy against the government of Bashar al-Assad, opening up and so on and so forth. Many of them, of course, later, when they saw what happened, regretted they're being used for such ends. But initially, they use as foot soldiers for interventions. So in order to prevent interventions, what does the article, of course, the article of Frans De Maegd's Investig'Action article, whose link we will put up in the description section. It's a very good article. He mainly focuses on exposing all the lies, point by point, rebutting them. But towards the end, of course, towards the conclusion, he says, this is typical of propaganda, building up towards intervention. And so perhaps a follow-up article or interview needs to be done, but we must alert or sound the alarm to progressive friends, solidarity groups in Europe and the United States that here in this corner of Africa, there is a drumming up of war. The propaganda so far indicates the pattern is, as we have seen before, in 2011, elsewhere, in Iraq, in Syria, that they are building up towards, by manufacturing crisis, humanitarian crisis, in particular massacre, they're insinuating genocide, of course. Eventually, they want to create some situation for conflict, for intervention. And in this regard also, it doesn't help that the situation in Sudan is in turmoil, still in flux, in crisis. And Sudan is being pushed towards a manufactured border conflict to it's to nobody's interest to have such conflict at this time. At any time, of course, but at this particular time, when both countries, Ethiopia and Sudan, are in transition towards stability, it is unhelpful to have such kind of conflicts that will have repercussions. On top of that, of course, is also the Nile issue, the situation of the Grand Renaissance Dam, the GERD. So all this requires vigilance and also a sharper analysis exposing the propaganda. I will give you in the few remaining sections. But before that, by way of reminding our audience all the points that you were making about the hiding history, inverting the victim and the aggressor, Michel Colon had this neatly summed up in his 5 principles of war propaganda, he calls them. So we'll put up on the screen. I use that often in my lectures to young people about propaganda and how it works. So the 5 principles of war propaganda, according to Michel Colon, one is obscure economic interest. Don't talk about economic interest at all, right? For example, they were going to war in Iraq in 2003. The obvious thing there was, of course, oil, right? They will not say we are going to Iraq because Iraq is rich with oil and other resources. No. These economic interests will be hidden by the media. So that's the first point of the war propaganda. Obscure economic interests. The second, as you said, is to hide history. Hide history in a historical background, context is never mentioned. So Tigray now in crisis is as if it happened yesterday. The situation of the TPLF is tyrannical rule of the past 27 years over Ethiopia, with the full support of the United States and the European Union, is never mentioned. All this historical background, hidden. So hide history. The third point is inverting the victim and the aggressor. So all of a sudden, it is as if the TPLF, that was the major aggressor, the perpetrator of genocide, massacres all over Ethiopia in the past 3 decades, TPLF now sort of has become the victim, the innocent victim. That the fact that it started the war on November 4 is never mentioned. The fact that for 27 years it brutally crushed the peoples of Ethiopia under its oppressive rule, never mentioned. So the victim becomes the aggressor and the aggressor becomes the victim. The fourth point of propaganda is demonization. Demonization, you have to paint very dark picture of the target of your propaganda, whether it is the Ethiopian government or the Eritrean government, the Eritrean troops, what have you. This demonization is constant. In Eritrea, for example, over the past 2-3 decades, Eritrea has been targeted with relentless demonization of its military, of its national service, SAWA, the president, the PFDJ, the country overall, its values, its political policy, and what have you. So this is the fourth point of demonization. And the final fifth point is to monopolize the news. Because you have monopoly of the news, the media outlets all over the Western world. You then never allow the alternative facts to emerge because you have monopoly, you have total information dominance. So these are the 5 points, and I must say they fit very well in this current situation in Tigray that we have been observing by the Western mainstream media and by the so-called human rights organizations. And Michel Colon is very much on point. I think we should invite him one day to talk about that and expand on that. So now in the concluding section, Mohamed, I would like you to talk. How do you see this situation unfolding? One, Ethiopia election is coming up by early June, I think. So how do you see the situation in Tigray now? TPLF is no more, but they still trying to resuscitate it. The crisis that they're trying to manufacture there, the humanitarian crisis, how is the Ethiopian government handling it, one? And secondly, how do you see the new Horn of Africa that we are constantly talking about here in the Horn of Africa TV? What are prospects for the vision of the new Horn of Africa emerging against all odds, against these obstacles that have been thrown in its way?
Very good. It is first. Let's compare and see the campaign and the propaganda, the propagandists in the Western countries or in the imperialist countries toward Tigray, and the same propagandists, their cousins on the other side, the propaganda they make about the Uyghur Chinese. The campaign against China and the Uyghur, it has also a religious ramification. To say that
the Xinjiang Uyghur
Muslims are oppressed in China and preparing, and that card will be used in the future in a very heavy thing. Preparing that it is to use now Islamist forces against China. They are preparing for that because they don't have the.
You are right. About 20,000 of them were participating in the Daesh movement via Turkey in Syria.
In Syria,
so the Chinese were very much concerned about that.
Yes, because they are preparing Chinese Daesh in a sense that they are making an experience. For them, Syria war, it is, and for them in a school better than even the best military school. In practice, they are fighting there. So the purpose is that by campaign later on to bring the Islamist forces to China and make very big problem for China in that region, and even connected to Tibet later on with the Buddhist chauvinist line to stop to put a stone in the Chinese. And this is very serious problem that it could fire back against them, and it could bring also a very serious war in the future. This is one side. So the Uyghur, now there is a lot of campaign. And then one is another nationality.
Believe it or not, Mohamed, last week in the Canadian Parliament, they passed a resolution 260 for with 0 against that genocide is happening in Xinjiang.
Look,
it's unbelievable.
Yes, and they have a big trade relation with China. So they are preparing. And I'm sure that in few years' time, here in Belgium and the Netherlands, everywhere, there will be that campaign. And they might even use Belgium of Muslim background and so on to incite them to go to jihad, to defend Muslims in China and this and this. They are preparing. I hope that the Chinese government is very aware of it, and the Chinese will be very aware of it, that they don't fall in the trap of that. I'm sure they were clever enough to do. There is, and this is one side. In Tigray, they don't mention anything about Tigray. They don't use language. They don't use religion. They don't use language in the propaganda of Tigray. Tigray is something as an island. It's like Mars or Jupiter. Because nobody lives in Mars and Jupiter, you cannot mention what kind of people are living there. It's a bit careful. Tigray, and the women are oppressed, women are raped, Eritrea, and so on and so on. This is really, it is a closed formula. But what is facing to your question, the new government of Ethiopia, they have to do four things step by step. One is that it is the toxic which have been inculcated inside Tigray is Tigrayan nationalism. And that Tigrayan nationalism, it didn't bring a lot of change for the majority of Tigrayan people. And how you are going to address that and bring an idea to the young victim of Tigray, one have to sit with the Tigrayans and themselves and try to bring a new curriculum, a new thinking. Unfortunately, in Tigray, there is no other forces came with a wider vision to say the main enemy for the people of Tigray is not other people, but it is TPLF what have created all this. Abused the Tigray people, used the name of Tigray, used also the sons and daughters of Tigray. Some of them even throw them after they took over the power. These minority Tigrayan bourgeoisie, for themselves, they used, they looted, and so on, and now they melted out, and so on. So in Tigray, and I advise to brothers and sisters in Tigray to think very rational. The people of Tigray will remain for a very long time, and they are part of that country and part of the region. They cannot continue like this. So they have to have a rational thinking. They have to have a new idea to integrate themselves with their interests in the new Horn of Africa. And this have to be, the homework must be done by the most progressive democratic element in Tigray. I hope that they will analyze their history and so on. They themselves, the first victim than anybody else, since TPLF 27 years in power, they didn't get anything, their name is abused, they're themselves abused and so on. So the homework, one is of the Tigrayans themselves, who consider that patriotic Tigrayans and democratic forces who think for Tigray and who think for the region, and they think also for Ethiopia. They have their own historical responsibility to take. On the other side, the federal government have to understand 27 years of TPLF inculcation and toxic thing is not easily can evaporate by only eliminating the military force of TPLF. So it has to have a vision to integrate and to discuss and to understand the heart beating of the people of Tigray. At the same time, to work and convince them that we are going to build a new home on the basis of equality of all the people of Ethiopia, and we are going to build a new region, that there will be a reconciliation, that is so nobody have to put a finger on anybody, but we have to take it as history, that it doesn't repeat any time, any place in that country. So it's the task of the federal government, and they have to create a serious dialogue with the people of Tigray. And of course, TPLF will try to sabotage it, they might kill, assassinate people and so on. But this is for temporary, it will not continue for a very long time. Third, it is Tigrayans, they are the only one who can, the major in the front line, they can bring peace. So one have to encourage these forces and support them despite the very difficult situation like this. But Tigrayans have to understand one thing. Tigray is very small part of Ethiopia. If a conflict continues in their area, they will suffer, the population will suffer, nobody else will suffer. It's the first, there will be a very remote area, and the damage will be on them. And they have to adjust their psychology, and they have to stop this enmity and close this chapter and open a new chapter. This is what I see. But one thing they have to understand, they cannot stop and reverse the history of the new Horn of Africa. And I'm sure that it is, Musawa will be open soon, and goods will come from there to Tigray. If there is any assistance they wanted to give the so-called friends of Tigray, it is the only possibility to reach Tigray is that it is the Eritrean harbor. The people of Eritrea and the government of Eritrea have no special hate toward the Tigray. They had always said, and the president have constantly said, I'm very sad for the people of Tigray. In the last interview, he said, it is a miscalculation of TPLF. And he talked to Debrecen. why you are planning a war? You are destroying, you are burning your home. Huh? They burned their home. Nobody burned it. But it is because of miscalculation and so on and so on. Now I heard one new element is that it was not Debretsion and his group who wanted the war. Those who really pushed for the war are the ones who have been chased away from the party in 2000 when the TPLF split it. The diehard extreme nationalists called the Teweldes, the CS, the Sadkans, and so on. In fact, how so far it is true, I have no written document, but what I was told is that they hijacked the organization and forced the war. So the people of Tigray and the intelligentsia of Tigray should now study that it is these criminals who took over the organization and imposed a war and brought all this disaster. They should be identified. Who led the war? That is, the analysis must come from the Tigrayans themselves, not in a way that it is a vendetta, but in a way that it is to educate the people of Tigray. The last time they are the one also who raised the war. So these warmongers, they will never bring peace for the people of Tigray or the region. But they are now minority. They cannot change the balance of forces. And their friends who are making propaganda have three meanings. When you make such kind of propaganda, you have also to prepare intervention. That I don't see now. I don't think that simultaneously they will bring troops and so on, stationed in Sudan, and for the moment intervene and so. I think within the establishment, I don't think now those who are leading for intervention, a direct intervention is not yet ready. And because they have a lot of spots of conflicts and problems and so on, as you see. You see now what is happening in the northern of Mozambique, which is a very huge gas discovery in the Indian Ocean. Now it is the Islamist forces took over that country, the northern part, and the capital of that place. It was now 3-4 days. They have taken the city, and foreigners and those who are working with the gas and so on, a huge Total and others are there. It is they invested more than 17 billion. They are running away. So intervention everywhere also for imperialism at the same time is not possible. They intervene in the areas where the balance of forces is in their advantage. So I don't think the balance of forces for the moment, I don't know tomorrow, is in their advantage in our region. Because there is new thing is born and is walking slowly as a child. This is the concept of the new Horn of Africa is now in Addis tomorrow or today. Also, they will go to another stage of the thing to cooperate among the three countries and so on. This is what I see. But as an Ethiopian, I advise our brothers and sisters in Tigray to first say, hold on. Yesterday, they have struggled for 17 years. Big part of the people of Tigray never benefited from that, except very few Tigrayans, fat cats, kleptocrats have benefited. And now, why somebody have to die for them? So they have to think very good and develop, and they have to close this chapter and start a new chapter that it is, which benefits the people of Tigray and Ethiopia and the region in general. And I don't think there is a total hostility for a long time and so on against the Tigrayan people. They are our brothers and sisters, and we are willing to accommodate them, to work with them, to discuss with them, and bring them on board with the new idea. That is the way I see it. Is we should not dig again and vendetta and so on. Those people who think on vendetta, they are not bringing solution. They are also playing the same role as TPLF.
Along this line, Mohamed, I was rather surprised that a high former Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs of the United States, in his tweet a few days ago, insinuated that the Eritrean army was in Tigray doing revenge. You see, they are hyping up this vendetta, revenge, enmity between people to be continuous, never to, to be a vicious cycle that will never be resolved. This, I think, the peoples of the Horn of Africa must be wise, as you always say, that this vendetta, vindictiveness, revenge, and so on and so forth, is to nobody's interest. It is peace that is to the interest of all of us, and that we must find a closure of the bitter legacy of the TPLF. That chapter must be closed. And first of all, the people of Tigray, it does not benefit them to dwell on that legacy, as you said. So I just wanted to point that out, that this revenge thing is being hyped up by sinister outside forces, not the people from within. Yeah?
Indeed, and there will be some narrow and foolish element from Ethiopia itself. They think politics. Professor Muspen, the late Professor Muspen, I really think sometimes about him, the statement he has said. He said this country never understood politics, which just means never been a modern country. It only understood the necessity. It's unfortunate that it is our country, Ethiopia, is becoming like that. We must understand the politics in our interest. That politics, as the French say, if you don't like politics, politics likes you. So it is a problem. If you try to hide in the mountain and you say, I don't like politics, politics will come until the mountain and likes you. That is because it can even awake you, and it can use your children against yourself. So politics in a modern sense of it, our interest in general, what is it? We are the same people, we have the same tradition, culture, and so on. We should upgrade our mind and then try to resolve this problem. Those who are living in 10,000 kilometers, 20,000 kilometers, 30,000 kilometers, they are not interested in the peace we want. Peace is, for us, is important, for our children, for our elderly, and so on. Yesterday, I was talking to a Syrian Kurd, an old man of 78 years old, and he doesn't speak any other language except Arabic. And he knows Hannah, my daughter. She helps him because of her work. And then he came and he said, and she introduced him to me. She said, this is my father. Then I said, I spoke to him in Arabic. He was surprised and almost he was crying. He said, I'm here. I always walk alone. I only speak Arabic and I have no contact and so on. And then he told me the wills. He told me in Syria there is about 10,000 trees of Rumman. Syria, everything he said. And she was listening, my daughter there. And he said, and they destroyed it, he said. And I know, Somalia, you are also in a war, he said. Iraq is in a war, and so on. He's explaining. And of course, all wars are imperialist engineered. It's not a conflict among the people. So they have to use the division. They have to create hate among themselves. So the people of Tigray, the conscious Tigrayans, twice. First of all, there is no geographical change happening between us. And there is no antagonism. Of course, the ruling class have used that, put sand on the eyes of the people of Tigray, and so on, never benefited the people. All these Tigrayans who are running away, dying in the sea and in the desert of the Sahara and so on. If TPLF was doing good for them, they would run away from their home and their families? No. So all we Ethiopians, there's not only the people of Tigray are responsible, all we Ethiopians, we have to reduce our tone. We have to develop a new confidence-building relationship among the people. And of course, politicians also have to be very careful when they utter something and when they say something. We have to understand they will be judged on the language that the masses are watching on them. But nobody can stop and reverse the development of history. It took us very long time, and it will be very difficult to bring it back. This is the evolution of the Horn of Africa. And the Horn of Africa, despite all its difficulties, coming back together. And our television role is that to bring everybody, despite our differences, which way to walk, our ideological differences is not important. Important is the basic principle. We are one, and we have to continue as one. And all this Horn of Africa belongs to us. We need peace, we need health, we need job, we need our youth to stay in their country and work for their country. And we have to say no for those who are inciting hate, whether they are from external forces or their agents in the region. We have to fight them clearly and say we will not accept.
With that, dear viewers, we have come to the conclusion of today's show. We thank our good friends and comrades at Investig'Action for that very good article expose by Frans De Maegd. We hope to bring one day Michel Colon to the Horn of Africa TV and do an interview with him on propaganda and the techniques of propaganda that he has exposed over the years. And I thank you very much, Comrade Mohamed, for this good discussion. Until next week, I am Elias Amare. Salam.